Hello everybody, it's Tarun. Welcome to your 6th tutorial in the CSS for presentation course. In this tutorial, I'll continue with the topic font style or italics. The font style property affects the posture of the text, that is whether the letter shapes are vertical, which is normal, or slanted, which is italic and oblique. So I'll just tell you all the properties of it. Okay, italic and oblique are both slanted versions of the font, and here you can see it has 4 values. One is normal, then italic, oblique and inherit, and by default it is normal and it can be applied to all elements. Okay, the difference is that italic version is usually a separate typeface design with curved letters forms, whereas oblique text takes the normal font design and just slants it. And the truth is that most browsers, they may look exactly the same, and you will probably use the font style property to make text italic, or to make text that is italicized in the browser default style display as normal. So I'll just show you one example. So here you can see the difference in oblique and italic. So in this example, where the sentence is full, you can not differentiate them, but here in this example you can see that the letters of this example have been curved, but the letters of this example have just been slanted. So now let's move forward to the next topic, which is font variant or small caps. Some typefaces come in small caps variant. This is separate font design that uses small uppercase style letters in place of lowercase letter designs. This one is tricky, and it is font variant property, and it is intended to allow designers to specify such a small caps font for the text element. Okay, so I'll just tell you the values and all of this property. So the values for font variant property are normal, small caps and inherit, and by default it is normal, and it can also be applied to all elements. In most cases, a true small caps font is not available, so browsers simulate small caps by scaling down uppercase letters in the current font. To typography sticklers, this is less than ideal and results in inconsistent stroke weights. But you may find it acceptable option for adding variety of small amounts of text. Okay, so I'll just use the font variety property in the coming exercise. The next property is the shortcut font property. Okay, it specifies multiple font property for each text element, and it can get repetitive and lengthy. So the creators of CSS provided the shorthand font property, and that compiles all the font related property into one rule. So I'll just tell you how. Okay, the value of font property is a list of values for all the font properties we just looked at, separated by character spaces. Okay, in this property the order of the values is not important. Okay, at minimum the font property must include a font size value and a font family value. Okay, in that order. And omitting one or putting them in the wrong order can cause the entire rule to be invalid. So I'll just show you one example. Okay, now here in the so now I have added font 1 EM and sans serif, which is 1 EM is the font size and sans serif is the font family. So if I save, so now let's see the change in the browser. So you can see the paragraph content had been changed. So once you have met the size and family requirements, the other values are optional and may appear in any order prior to the font size. When size, style, weight or variant are omitted, they revert back to normal. There is one value in there, which is line height, that we have not seen before. As it sounds, it is just adjust the height of the text line and is used to add space between lines of text. It appears just after font size separated by a slash. So I'll just show you one example of this. Okay, so just save it and let's see what happens in the browser. So you can see that it has changed completely. So this was all about the font properties. So now let's move forward to the next topic, which is changing the text color. Well, you would have gotten a glimpse of how to change text color in HTML, and if you have done my HTML tutorial, then you might have seen it in the tutorials of my HTML course. And to be honest, there is a lot more to than I said it about there. You can change the color of text with the color property, which is there in CSS. Okay, so I'll just show you the syntax or the values for the color property. Okay, the values are color value, which is name or numeric, and it can also inherit. Default is depends on the browser and user preference, and it can be all applied to all the elements. And CSS 2.1 defines 17 standard color names. So I'll just tell you them. Okay, so these are the 17 color names, which is black, white, purple, lime, navy, aqua, silver, maroon, fuchsia, olive, blue, orange, grey, red, green, yellow and teal. Using the color property is very straightforward. The value of the color property can be a predefined color name, as I told you, or a numeric value describing a specific RGB color. And here are a few examples which I'll tell you, which will make the H1 element in a document gray. So I'll just show you the example. Okay, so here now let's see what happens. Let's save and run it in the browser. So you can see that the H1 has now been gray. So don't worry about the numeric values for now. I just wanted you to see what they look like, and RGB colors will be discussed in detail in the unit colors and backgrounds. So in this unit we'll stuck just with color names for demonstration purposes. Color is inherited, so you can change the color of all text in a document by applying the color property to the body element, as I'll just show you. Okay, so now let's see what happens. So you can see that the color of whole body has been changed to fuchsia. So okay, so you probably would not want all the text to be fuchsia, but you get the idea. Okay, and for the sake of accuracy, I want to point out that the color property is not strictly a text related property. In fact, according to CSS specification, it is used to change the foreground as opposed to the background color of an element. The foreground color of an element consists of both the text and it contains as well as its border. And when you apply a color to an element, which is including image elements, that color will be used for the border as well, unless there is a specific border color property that overrides it. And we'll talk about more borders and border color in the unit thinking inside the box. Before we add color to the online menu, I want to take a little side trip and introduce to you a few more type of selectors, which will give us more flexibility in targeting elements in the document for styling. So now let's see a few more selector types. So far we have been using element names as selectors. In the last unit, you saw how selectors can be grouped together in a comma separated list, so you can apply properties to several elements at once. So here are example of selectors that you already know. Okay, so here for element selector P, you can define a property like this, and for group selectors P underline P TDTH. Okay, and the disadvantage of selecting elements this way, of course, is that the property, in this case navy blue text, will apply to every paragraph and other listed elements in the document. Sometimes you want to apply a rule to a particular paragraph or paragraphs. In this section we'll look at three selector types that allow us to do just that, and these three are descendant selectors, ID selectors, and class selectors. So let's start with the descendant selectors. A descendant selector targets elements that are contained within other element. It is an example of contextual selector because it selects the element based on its context or relation to the other element. Okay, the descendant selectors are indicated in a list separated by character space. The example which I will tell you targets EM element, which is emphasized text element, but only when they are appeared in list items. So emphasized text in paragraphs and other elements will not be affected in this case. So if I write selector like this, LIEM, okay, then it will only change the color to olive. So here is one other example that show how contextual selectors can be grouped in a comma separated list, just as we saw earlier. This rule targets EM elements but only when they appear in H1, H2 and H3 headings. Okay, so here you can see that I have not used comma here, so it shows the browser how to be you can say read by the browser. So now let's see the next example, which is this. Here for H1 where it is EM, and H2 where it is EM, and H3 where it is EM, the color will be changed to red only. And it is possible to nest descendant selectors several layers deep. The example which I will just now tell you targets EM elements that appear in anchor in ordered list. Okay, so this is example of that. Okay, in ordered list for in anchor and then EM. So there are other contextual selectors as well. These are child selectors, adjacent sibling selector, and general sibling selectors. But these selectors are beyond the scope of this course. But I just told you the name, and you can go ahead and look it on the internet. So I'll just move forward to the next type of selector, which is ID selectors. In the HTML, you might have learned about ID attribute that gives an element a unique identity name, its ID reference. The ID attribute can be used with any HTML element, and it is commonly used to give meaning to the generic div and span elements. ID selectors allow you to target elements by their ID values. The symbol that identifies ID selectors is the hash symbol. So I'll just show you an example of list item with an ID reference. So this is an example of list item with an ID reference, which is catalog 1234. So now you can write a style rule just for that list item using an ID selector. I'll just show you how. Okay, so here you can see first of all you will write the selector name, then hash ID, and then you write the property for it. Okay, because ID values must be unique in the document, it is acceptable to omit the element name. Okay, the following rule is equivalent to the last one. So if I had just used this instead of the above one, it would have done the same. So you can also use an ID selector as part of a contextual selector. In the example I am going to show you, a style is applied to only a list element that appears within the element identified as links. So in this way you can treat list items in the element links differently than all other list items on the page without additional markup. So I'll just show you the example now. Okay, so you should be beginning to see the power of selectors here and how they can be used strategically along the well-planned semantic markup. So before moving forward to the next selector, which is class selectors, I just want to remind you something. Values for the ID attribute must start with a letter, which can be capital or small. In addition to letters, the name may contain digits 0 to 9, hyphen and underscore, colons and dot. And note that colons and dot are best avoided as they may be confused with CSS syntax when used as a selector. So now let's see the third category of selectors, which is class selectors. So this is one last selector type, and then we'll get back to text style properties. So this is one other element identifier that you might have learned in HTML. Okay, and it is the class identifier, which is used to classify elements into a conceptual group. Unlike the ID attribute, multiple elements may share a class name. Not only that, but an element may belong to more than one class. You can target elements belonging to the same class with a class selector, and class names are indicated with a period, which is dot symbol, at the beginning of the selector. So for example, in the next which I am going to show you, to select all paragraphs with class equals to special, we'll use this selector p.special, where I have defined the property color to be orange. To apply a property to all the elements of the same class, omit the element name in the selector, or be sure to leave the period. It's the character that indicates the class. This would target all paragraphs and other elements that has been marked up with class special. Okay, so this will mark up every element which have been marked class special. The next topic is the universal selector in this tutorial, which is the last topic, and in the next tutorial I'll just start with the text line adjustments. So CSS2 introduced a universal element selector, which is asterisk, that matches any element like a wildcard in programming languages. The style rule is just asterisk and then property, and it makes the foreground of every element in the document orange, and it is also useful as a contextual selector as shown in the example which I am going to show you, that selects all the elements in an intro section. Okay, so the universal selector causes problems with form controls in some browsers. If your page contains some form inputs, the safest bet is to avoid the universal selector. So this was all from my side in this tutorial. In the next tutorial I will start with text line adjustment. So thank you guys for watching. I will see you in the next tutorial.